Hello. I decided to do a quick video, maybe not so quick, about the websites I've created over the years. So, as of this year, I've recently passed 25 years of doing web stuff, so I thought that would be a cool milestone. But the other issue is that as of December of this year in 2020, Adobe Flash, aka Macromedia Flash, will no longer be active in most browsers. Now, there might be some ways around it, but I don't want to guarantee that or risk that. So I figured what I would do is I would screen cap some of my websites going way back to 1995 and just sort of give them a brief overview, look at how they evolved over time and kind of where I ended up. But also, a lot of the things like Flash cartoons might be easy to replicate later, but things like the menus might be a little bit more difficult. So I wanted to sort of just show everything in context as it was. I spent the past year or so going through most of these and kind of hosting them, fixing broken links, broken images, actually hunting down images on my hard drive that were in scattered locations. And pretty much, I think I've almost got everything that I've ever created on one site now. What we're going to do is we're going to scroll down, and I've got quite a few of these. So let me just scan down real quick. I've increased the magnification of this just to sort of simulate an old, I don't know, 1,000 pixel screen. I know what, back when I first started doing things, it was like 640 by 480. Then we were lucky enough to go up to 800 by 600, and then I think 1024 by something. I don't know. So probably that third step is where we're going to end up being. Otherwise, we end up like down here, and for the screen cap purposes, it's probably not going to be looking too good. So I'll bump it up about 50% just to be able to get a better idea. All right, July 16th, 1995. Now, I believe we had gotten the web or some sort of internet connection much earlier than that. I think somewhere in June, I actually had a couple downloaded files. I don't know if I have those here. I could probably bring them up later. I know I had AOL earlier in the spring, but probably 95 is really the earliest we had online. My dad had some BBS things earlier than that, especially my friends who had all the old games going back to the early 90s. And I even have a couple emails printed off from the late 80s. But as far as web design goes, July 16th is the first time I ever really tinkered around with HTML, web design, or really anything. So basically, what I have here is I have a Tick fan page, which I saved the HTML, brought it into Notepad of some sort, and started making sense of how the tags interacted with the static content. So as you see, I just kind of have my name here, some centering stuff, and I replaced one of the images with another image on my hard drive. At this point, BMP or bitmap was sort of the only format I'd really been using at that point because that's what Microsoft Paint would save into. I believe Pix was also another one I used to play with if some graphics program supported that. But uh, JPEG was sort of a new one for me. I believe I use a program called LView for Windows 3.1 in order to save those. So I had to start saving a lot of my images in that. Problem being is that I also realized that JPEGs are so much smaller, so I thought it would be a great idea to take all my images and save them as JPEGs, even my old Microsoft Paint ones, thus crunching all the quality down pretty bad. So luckily I did find the BMPs on some floppies later on, so I was able to rescue them, but I really didn't understand what was going on behind the scenes for compression and image formats and things like that. So as you see, this one is basically, it was never hosted online. It was just a local file. And I don't even have a copy online. I just have a screenshot of it. I also went back and I manually changed the background to gray because Netscape 1 and earlier ones, if you didn't define the background, it would actually not be white like modern websites would be. It would be this sort of neutral gray. So you'd actually have to go and manually specify your background to be white if you actually wanted a white background. Otherwise, this is sort of a telltale sign of someone who's very basic in web design, even back in 95. If they forgot to do the background, it would always have this kind of weird gray color. Moving up again, I started editing a little bit more. So now this is only 3 days later. I created my own new page, dan.htm. Back in Windows 3.1, before 95, we were able to actually have 4-digit extensions. So we had HTM was pretty much the norm here. Again, this was never hosted. This is just on my hard drive. And I just started creating some other things. I've learned how to do a background, which of course I chose the most garish one possible. This is a Cable from the X-Men Marvel universe, just inverted. We in 8th grade we had to do a country. We had to make a country. So these are the coins for that country. And as you see, saving it to JPEG has all sorts of aliasing and artifacts and things. So that's not pretty. Then I just linked to some images I had on my hard drive. Age of Apocalypse was big at the time. I believe that came out in January of '95, so I'd really been into that, collecting all those comic books. I think by June or July, the whole story arc wrapped up, so I was able to, yeah, collect all those, and I was really into that at the time. And then shortly after that, I kind of got out of X-Men because that was really a good storyline, in my opinion. But after that, it just sort of fizzled out. Although I did sort of casually keep in tabs of things, and I think I had a couple of subscriptions that I continued to subscribe to after a while. But other than that, I sort of petered out a little bit. All right, here we go. First online homepage. So great address right there, just an IP address. This is actually hosted at my the university which I work at now. But at the time, my dad worked at there. So we actually didn't have a way to get the files over there. We call it the sneaker net, meaning you put it on a floppy drive and you use your feet or car to walk it over to the server and install it on there. So basically, we had a shared homepage for the entire family, and we were able to have an HTML extension at that point because it was some sort of Unix server. And what we did is we had hyperlinks that were just sort of internal hyperlinks. So if you go to each one of these, it just jumps down to a different portion of the page, and everyone coexists on the same web page. So as you see here, we've just sort of got, this is August 13th, so about a month later or so. And everything was just links. Basically, the whole purpose of a website at this point was to link to other places, which was great for connecting the web, but pretty much as soon as anyone found your page, the first thing they did was leave your page, which didn't really do much for keeping people engaged. As you see, I've kind of kept a lot of my things similar. This is one of my paint drawings that I did in class one day, just when I was bored, and another one that I'd saved as a JPEG, and of course, just killed all the detail. Not that it was all that detailed to begin with. And things I was into the time was again just X-Men, and more X-Men. That was kind of what I was into at the time. My brother had some stuff here. He's into Power Rangers and Goosebumps. My sister was into Barbie, and that's about that. Let's go back a couple pages. All right. And then again, I just sort of linked to my own page here. So this is sort of my first online page, even though it wasn't its own page. All right. Then what we were able to do is we were able to break everything out. So at this point, we now had just the family page, and I will leave this on the screen for a second. This is one of those magic eye pictures, one that we actually were able to create. We really had no design sense at the time, so we just would pretty much put anything as the background. And black text over that just made it look pretty bad. Links look okay, at least they pop out. So again, at this point, what we have is we just have links to other people's pages. So if we go to like my mom's page, it's genealogy. If we go to my brother's page, it's a lot of the skating he did. And my sister, again, was kind of the same thing, just more skating, life events, things like that. And then my page, I will get to in 1 second because I actually broke that out to my own one. So here we are up here. So this is my first official page that's by itself, August 27th. So really a little over a month we've kind of progressed to this. So at this point I moved to black background, red text, very common for retro Web 1.10 sites now. And just a lot of bright colors on a black background. So this is kind of the way it stayed for this incarnation of the Dan page, pretty much until its end. And it's actually still online now. I sort of resurrected it, and it's still at relatively the same address. Again, X-Men links. I started getting into anti-Barney or Barney hate sites, where we just really hated Barney the dinosaur so much that we had entire websites dedicated to how much we disliked him. I don't know why I have the Swedish chef there, but I think that might have been like a translator that would translate into things into pseudo-Swedish. And then I have a link to my cat's page, and this one is the only one that's really never changed over time. So basically I just have links to cat pages, some pictures, and this is where I first started learning JavaScript, where I did like mouse overs and clicks to sort of do like a gallery to show different pictures of her. Going back. And then just, again, we're still at that IP address, still on that server. We didn't really have any way to get there, but we just sort of put on floppy disks and moved it over. I also found a WordPerfect document on my hard drive where my mom was writing to one of our family members, I think in Sweden somewhere, some extended family, and she included a couple screenshots of the web pages that we had been working on. Curiously enough, we actually called them home pages at the time. So, I mean, home page was basically whatever the landing page was inside your website as a whole, but we just called the entire site home pages because we didn't really know any better. So as you see here, I have it kind of looks similar to this one, but it looks like it's a slightly. This is from September, so this is just a little bit later. So I went to the zoo and I took a picture of one of those like mole rats that lives underground, and we digitized that and I made that the image. So just going back on that, in order to digitize images at the time, I actually would take it on film, and then I would pay for the Konica program to be put on, I think, on a floppy disk, and then it would use its own proprietary software to view whatever photos were there. And then I think you could export them as like TIFFs at that point, and then you could pretty much convert it to JPEG and do whatever you wanted. So a lot of my early image work was actually just taking on film, getting it processed into some grainy photo format, saving it twice, and then finally getting it as a JPEG. All right, November. So we've moved a little bit more again. I have moved it to a star background, which was another sort of trope for early Web 1.0 sites. Kept the red text. Why not? Um, Expanded a little bit more, added a guest book. I think this was, yeah, I killed all the links in these so they just don't work anymore. But I think if you view the web, no. At some point, we created our own guest book. I think I was using a public one at this point, but then we learned how to use CGI and things like that to make our own. So at this point, I think that one's linked to the old one. Um, I spent all night one time creating a slideshow for my sister to sort of document from being a baby to growing up, and basically it just uses a meta refresh to just jump across several pages. This is one I only found recently and sort of reconstructed. I did this as I think as a actually it wouldn't have been a birthday present because it wasn't the right time of year. I think I just did it to be nice. Um, but again, just more X-Men pages, lots more X-Men pages. Um, Overpower was a card game, X-Men like a Marvel card game at the time, so I had some links to that. I never played it, but I was just sort of learning about it. Mark Boyd was an artist for Marvel, and I signed his guest book, and he sent me an email, so it was kind of cool to have someone who was like sort of known in the industry contacting me. Sort of the first way that the internet was able to connect, a fan to someone who actually produced something, so that was kind of cool. X-Files I was huge into at the time, and then I was also getting into games. I mean, I'd been a fan of Apogee and those sort of games for a long time, but now that they had a web presence, I was, linking to those and sort of being able to actually download games and not rely on my friends, brothers, BBS to grab everything. More Barney hate sites, some cities, some games and stuff like that. And here's something interesting. I linked to different search engines. So this is obviously pre-Google. So we had InfoSeek, which was an okay one. Webcrawler was good. Lycos was sort of my go-to for the time. Excite, I barely remember that one. And then, of course, Yahoo is still around, so that was sort of a web portal search engine at the time. And then there was one called Webcrawler, which would actually go out and it would grab all of these and give you sort of an aggregate of anything you searched for. So that was kind of cool. All right, moving on up. So then our main homepage, that one sort of updated a bit, sort of made the background a little bit more pleasant to a degree. This was actually the mural on my wall, my bedroom growing up. I had the moon and the earth in the background, so that was in lieu of wallpaper. I just had a mural on my wall, so we took a picture of that. Again, we have more just some school stuff, some stuff from my dad links, my mom's links, I believe, is the same thing. And then we had a family breakout page where I had then broke it down into my page, which I decided to actually move to my ISP at that point. So I just had a sort of a in construction thing. I think my brother's page is still the same. My sister's page is the same. And then the Hobbs page is definitely the same as well. All right, so this is January 96. We moved into a new year. All right, so now I started doing some more updates. So this is March through June 96. I did a couple different updates, basically just revisions where I changed the splash screen. There's my Earth again. So I believe this was March. So this is the first one. Does the guest book work yet? Nope. All right, so I changed the image, just more links, pretty much the same stuff, I believe. Oh yeah, I also put some Rise of the Triad custom levels here. So these actually still work. I believe if you click on those, it'll download the zip file for those. I do have these on my Danarchy site right now, though, so if you go to that site, you can actually have a little bit better, easier means to get there. Uh, April moved up a little bit more. So this one basically had a difference between Netscape 1 and Netscape 2. So there's sort of a weird bug in Netscape 1 where if you put let's see, click here. Yes, this is my original one. So if you go to this source code here, you can actually put multiple body statements here. And what it will do is it would flash through each of these colors and make sort of like this cascading color slideshow strobe effect. They fixed that in Netscape 2, but I like the effect, so I just sort of actually ended up having two pages there, which allowed you to sort of just bounce between the two. Again, I believe the links are pretty much the same, except I have just more junk down here, which I don't know. All right, then June. So this is sort of not the final version, but just sort of another updated one. So this is sort of a flip-flop. So this one actually kept the Netscape 1 as the primary, then Netscape 2 was sort of the other one. And then the links are pretty much the same, except I got rid of that junk down at the bottom. Oh yeah, and then I changed Hobbs ended up being my splash screen at the time. All right, so then, so what we did here is we moved over to our ISP. So BBSNet was who we got our internet from at the time. So we weren't using the university anymore. And everything hung off this at this point. So this is the new version of our main family page. There was also a frame version too, where we had sort of just like a splash screen, a breakout menu, a hit counter, and then some JavaScript to figure out what time it is. We also started hosting business sites too. So a lot of the local businesses, we were sort of making a small business just to create them sort of a very simple web presence because that was new at the time and it was something that was interesting. Again, we have our personal home pages, so it's just a breakout that goes to the different web pages. This is my mom's new version, which I believe is the current version. Basically broke down sort of our 4 genealogical family breakouts on her side with some extra pictures and things going back to 1800s or so, back in the old country. Then just more pictures and things like that. All right, so my page, I will go to that in a second. That actually goes to the live version. Chris's page doesn't link for some reason, and then Hobbs' pages is the same. I believe we had a guest book. Yep, so this is when we started actually doing guest books locally. So we were able to get some sort of local server-side scripting to be able to create a form and dump some HTML text into a file. And then people were able to jump by and just sort of leave very rudimentary guest book entries. All right, again, so I already had a June 96 one down below, but I guess I must have updated it a second time because this was actually the BBSNet ISP version. So even though it's the same month, I believe it's slightly different. At this point, I think my hit counter broke, but I had like 1,300 visits, which was not bad for a site that was just sitting on an IP address somewhere. No idea how many times people found that. Probably most of them were me, but I was sort of happy with that. Again, I did have my personal guest book here, so I had my one of my childhood friends, a couple random people who actually found it somehow, which was kind of weird. And then I broke my links down into separate pages too. So I had basically my X-Men links with sort of ratings about how much I liked them. X-File links, I made that morph there, where I morphed Mulder into Scully. More Barney links, game links. I was able to go in and grab the sprites from Duke Nukem 3 and turn them into animated images. More search engines, Alta Vista, that was a new one. Had 6 gig of memory on the server, so that was nuts at the time. And sounds. These are things if you wanted to like replace the sounds in Duke Nukem 3D, it would be some stuff that I created. I don't think they're any good, but they're there. All right, so this is sort of a weird way to get things over there. So what we had to do is, I believe, I had to use an old laptop with a command line FTP client to get the files over there. And I believe some point between this BBS ISP host and our original university, I actually had to create an FTP server on my computer, host the files, telnet into the server, and then FTP back to my personal computer and do a reverse move over. So a lot of weird things to sort of get the files over. But now I was able to just sort of put them on a floppy disk, use some old ancient laptop, and then use a command line FTP to bring all the stuff over. Here's my sister's current site, current as in, 24 years ago, but basically she had some links. Fractals, we were into those at the time, creating different Mandelbrot sets and stuff in Java. So we were all into that because they looked pretty. And then more links to stuff. I believe she had a guest book. Yep. So she had her own personal guest book with her aunt and some random family members. That was, again, June. All right, moving into the fall, October. This is when we started getting these now buttons. So these 88 by 31 buttons are ubiquitous now. I mean, especially if you're into like the old early web aesthetic, everyone wants to create buttons, and people still create these now just to have their own personal stamp of their own site. So I started collecting those because I started seeing them everywhere. And as we go into more sites, we're going to see them grow quite a bit. I believe my guest book is still the same. I think it's yep, same one. I started working with tables to try to organize content a little bit better, create a little bit more of a layout. Some text art. Chat rooms are big, so I was able to link to some of those. And then image maps, where you could have one static image, but then certain portions of it would then turn into a link, so you can then jump to different areas of the site. So instead of having just text links, which I also had done here, you could actually use a graphic one as well. I created a site for my school as a contest, or sort of a web contest to get a $500 savings bond if you created a website for your school. So I kind of whipped this up in like an afternoon and ended up winning, which I felt bad with because my brother and his friends created a web page too, and they spent like a whole week on it, and I just sort of did one in one day and ended up winning. So felt a little bit bad about that, but hey, money's money. Fame main.
This is Tom's website.
All right, let's do that again. So, just a little context here. My dad recorded an intro using voice to the website. It ended up being like a megabyte worth of the WAV file because we didn't have MP3s or anything like that at the time. So, on a dial-up, downloading a megabyte file would just never work. So what I've done is I found that file and I put it back into this page. So even though this page isn't authentic to what it looked like at the time, it was authentic to what we intended it to be. So now that we have broadband connection, we can actually give it a view.
This is Tom's website. Welcome. If you don't have sound, you're screwed. See ya.
Yep, so we started using buttons instead of links for some reason, just to make it more complex. Same sort of thing. The site's just sort of, we'll go to that one in a second, but most of these are going to be pretty much the same as we've already seen them kind of in their latest one. Yeah, the guest book is still there. The schools that we created, some special interests, things like that. And yeah, my mom's site. All right, at this point we actually created our own domains, which is kind of cool. So believe, yeah, we also had our homepage service where we could create sites for people for money. So we created a page for that, and then I believe there's also a site that lacked the voice as well. All right, moving March 1997. So moving forward, we are now getting more complex. We're starting to work with frames, which we already saw on the main web page. But I gave you a choice. So if you have a huge monitor and you can actually afford the real estate of having all those frames, you can go here and see everything broke down. And as you see, I have plenty more of those 88 by 31 buttons. I have the image map here for menus, and then I have a basic sort of stripped down version of the website down there. So just tons of, oh, yeah, I also had another image map of my friends where you could go to their web pages, but unfortunately most of those aren't working anymore. And then if we don't have a big screen, you could go here, and it basically gave you the original site with pretty much all the stuff inside. So again, still all those different websites. And I believe if you click on that, I don't know why that links to that, but it does. And then probably, oh yeah, I think I have some Java applet here, but since Java is not supported anymore, we're back to the point where it doesn't show. Gone full circle. All right, so if you saw here, I had a Quake link here, which is sort of broken at the moment. But what I did is, and I was sort of debating whether I actually had this on this main site at this point. I think I'd created a Geocities site, and I believe it maybe always been there, but I'm not entirely sure. I thought maybe I had something local, Quake related, but maybe I didn't. I really have no way to confirm that because none of this stuff exists anymore. So um, basically, I have a couple sites called Anarquake, which, I was 16, 17, anarchy, edgy kids. It was just sort of the thing at the time. Yeah, I put sound, but, putting sound in your web pages was another big thing too. Really, all I hit here is just links to other sites, some mods I had created where I reskinned some of the Quake monsters, and then also links to other Quake mods where you could change different characters and just sort of change up Quake a little bit and do different things. There's a couple of versions of the site, so that was March, April. Again, I put that stupid sound there, and I started including some of my own things. So I had sort of some levels I had created for Quake. I put the Baywatch zombie bathing suit on the zombie. I don't know why. That was stupid back then. But a lot of people somehow liked it for some reason. I created just some more skins of things, and then I also linked to other people's mods. And the last one here, thankfully I took that annoying sound out, but I somehow put black text on this horrible background. I broke things out, so I then broke up page to just my stuff. I added a couple extra things. I believe I've also rehosted these on my Danarchy site, so you can see those there as well. Oh, there's that sound again. And more things it looks like I added a couple more links to different Quake mods. And then I had a guest book, which, yep, actually it looks like I do have a few other people from school, some friends of friends that signed that. So this is sort of like the intro of me branching out into game sites. So that's going to be sort of a theme going forward. At this point, my main website was more or less kind of the same, so nothing really changed there. So, all right, so I went through and I created a level in Quake, which is sort of like a museum. It didn't really look good. It didn't really play as a level, but what I started doing is taking screenshots and I actually turned it into sort of I call it VR, virtual reality, but it's basically just a sort of a slideshow. It's more akin to like a mist type experience, but than anything else. So inside here on the main page, you could actually get to my website by navigating this museum, or you could just jump straight to it if you wanted to. So in here, I just use image maps to sort of navigate this place. Oh, dead end. Go back. So you can just click on certain portions of this, and if you click on these globes, they would actually go to places. This one just goes to Alta Vista website. I think I had some like random search engine things here, so it would just go to like a random site. But in here, you could just sort of navigate. Again, I have more of these. Yeah, I think each of these globes just goes to like a random website. But since that web search engine doesn't exist anymore, then it's kind of pointless. All right, so I had some text on here just to kind of let you know where you're going. Over here, this looks like you got a place to sit down. All right, so here's some hints. So if you want to get to like my music page, you have to go upstairs. There's some, I think entertaining was like the game page, the friends and families page, then just some random stuff, random sites where all the globes. All right, so let's go down here, turn around. So I believe we can go down here into the scary hole, and I think that goes to Marilyn Manson's website because I was, of course, edgy and was into that at the time. You could go around the room here, but you can also go through here into this room, which is my family page. So again, you can go to my brother's site, my sister's site, my parents' site, and so forth, or we can just leave, and this would just bring you around the other end. All right, now we're going to go into the dark stairs, I believe. Let's see. All right, so here's my game page. So you can go to the Quake page. You can go to the Dopefish page on Apogee, as well as 3D Realms. Let's go back here, but let's go upstairs. Head on upstairs. So this was this is actually a different level that I made for Quake. This is called The Room. It wasn't really modeled after my room. It was just modeled after a room. It had a bed and stuff like that too. Uh, let's see. So there's 99.7. This is the local alternative radio station at the time. We'll go out the window in just a second, but that will go to their main website. If we go into the room a little bit, I believe, yep, there's a bookshelf. There's a duck. That's sort of an Easter egg. These would go to Library of Congress for some reason. This will go to the 311 website, which I don't know if it still exists. I guess not. What else we got? Yep, 311. There's the recycle bin. I don't think that'll work. I think that was a page like dedicated to the Windows recycle bin. I'm not sure why. Music page, some bands I was into at the time. I don't know what this is. Well, it's more just random sites. Does the closet do anything? Nope. Okay, and then if you go out the window, you go to the park, which was another site I had created. I believe. I don't think you can do much. If you go over here, you find Hobbs, and then that is another Easter egg, and then you go to the fountain here, and then that's basically it. Whoops. All right, so that was just one way to get to my site using some sort of complex method. All right, now Geocities. So I had created a Geocities site because I wanted to break out a lot of my game things into its own site. So at this point, I kind of moved into a web page design that I copied a lot, which is basically use frames to have your main content, and then you reuse your menu on the side frame. Main reason doing this is it became very unwieldy to have your menu on every single page that you updated, because then you had to repeat that work for however many pages you had. So as you see with all these pages here, that would have been a whole lot of work. So at this point, I just sort of created different pages to all the games I was kind of following. A lot of them hadn't come out yet at the time. I believe Quake was sort of the only one, but then Hexen was the next one in line. Quake 2, Unreal, Half-Life was coming out way later. And then Duke Nukem Forever, we kind of know what happened to that. And then Prey, that was another one that sort of came out a long time later too, and it didn't look anything like it. So what I had here is basically links to the external sites, to like the official pages, and then I had some I had some pages where I went over like the weapons of every game, the enemies, mostly just in text. I don't think I had any pictures at the moment. Drawbacks, plots, comments, just sort of my thoughts on all these games. And then I did have a picture section where I had just, I actually went out and cut out all the stuff and made them into transparent images just to sort of show off everything. Interesting. It's just these pages are so old, you actually see things that were possibly going to be released, but didn't. And if you think the quality is terrible, they really are, because I used a program to sort of crunch down the file size, which ended up like dropping a lot of colors. So I was all about efficiency in images back then. This is like maybe like a 2-3 color image. Anyway, yeah, so like there was like a wizard or something like that. I don't know. Dragon. There's a lot of stuff that I think I just included, but like it never actually got this is one I created. Hexen 2, I like this game. This is pretty cool. And it was kind of cool to start seeing 3D games come out with all sorts of different things. Quake 2. Just trying to see if there's anything here that sort of like stood out. Yeah, I think Unreal was the weird one, because a lot of these are pre-release images, and a lot of them were just ones that never got into the game, but I included them here. Let's see, Half-Life. Half-Life was a fun. This is all just like concept art, because we didn't really even see anything in game for quite a while. Daikatana, Sin, Duke 4 is the first Duke Nukem 4 model. And then Prey, we just had no idea about. What do I have for misc images? I think maybe I just like had everything on one page. All right, moving forward. This is all chronological, so it's going to bounce around a lot at this point. So we had created a fractal page where we had, just information about fractals, some samples of things we created or downloaded online. And then we had sort of a big gallery, again, of ones we had created or put online. So some of these we actually was someone else's website where you could just put in some random coordinates or some random numbers. He would then process the fractal and then send it to you, and then let you know how it looks. So a lot of it was sort of a fun games to see what the fractal would look like based on some random numbers. All right, so we already went through the museum, but that was just one way to get to my site around this time, or you could just skip right past it and go to my main site, which again was pretty much the standard one. I removed a lot of the now buttons since they were getting like really unwieldy. And then I had this random gopher page, which was kind of weird because I had this online for a while and I took it offline and someone messaged me randomly on ICQ, which was the messaging program at the time, saying that somehow this went viral. I don't know, other than the web was really small back then and we could pretty much do anything. So I just had links to my old sites. Most of these are pretty much going to be exactly the same, except for the game ones, which I'll get to in just a second. There's just some random edgy content. This is a birthday page my friend sent me. And then here's my first Half-Life page. So Half-Life is going to play a huge role in most of the sites I'm creating from here over the next like 3 or so years. So I had created just this real basic Half-Life page. It kind of was in the same vein as my Geocities one before I started merging things. So basically I just have the same sort of stuff, just upsides, downsides, weapons, plots, monsters, all the same kind of stuff we saw. Only difference is I sort of created my own splash screen there. So it looks like I did have a redirect that jumped to my Geocities at the time or to my tripod page, but I was able to sort of strip that out and then resurrect this page. So I don't know if this is ever online or if I created it locally, but I was able to find the files and I just put it back online. All right, so here is the latest version of the Dan site. So this is the way it stands right now, pretty much at its original address, more or less. It still has the VR thing here, still has the main page here. It looks like I went back and yeah, I actually souped up this page a little bit. So even though this page is the current version, I sort of brought it back to like the ultimate version. So this isn't really authentic to what it looked like at the very end, but it was sort of the way I wanted to be remembered. So I have all of all the buttons, like every button I've ever had on here. And I also put a Doom track because I believe I had some Doom MIDI files on my original site, so I put those back there too. So basically, I just sort of created the site as I wanted it to persist for all time at this point. I've got a couple links here, basically to my GeoCities, my tripod, and then I also have my school site, but I will get to those in a second. I also have a randomized quote of the day, just using some JavaScript with some sort of sarcastic comments that I thought up when I was 17. So here's my first school website. So my school basically gave us some web space, and anytime I had a host, I would then think up a new site and create a website for it. So I had my main BBS ISP site, I had the main domain, I had the GeoCities, I had Tripod coming up soon, and then I also had my school site. So basically, I just started creating random sites for pretty much everything. So here's where we sort of get to the reason I'm creating this video. Shockwave Flash is going away in like a month and a half or 2 months and a half. So I wanted to show off all of my Flash before it dies. Dan's Solve page. There's no reason for this Flash. I had basically a non-Flash version, which if you went back and went to the regular site, it would basically be the same thing just with an image map as opposed to the Flash one. And that would bring you to all these different images. So I don't know if any of these work. Yep. PaintShop Pro, I was creating a ton of images and backgrounds and stuff like that. So I was creating a whole ton of things like that. I have my Quake page, which is just my GeoCities, and then some files where I just hosted some images, programs and such that I thought were interesting. The Sheepy one's interesting because that was actually a desktop program, but then it's since been ported over to a web front end, so you can actually put the sheep on your web pages now. I'll show you that in just a second. And then Winamp, I still use Winamp with the default skin on it. Moving along. So this existed for pretty much from the fall into the spring. Here is my newest GeoCities page. So this is basically a certain point I started creating, pretty much from October through December. I started turning into I guess what I would call a blog. I mean, we didn't call it a blog, and then we called it basically news updating, where basically you would have just sort of like daily updates over whatever was on your mind at the time. This, unfortunately, was the only site that I had to pretty much 100% grab off the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine. I have no copy of this at all. So 100% of what you see here, broken links and all, is pretty much gathered directly off that site. So I had to reconstruct the whole thing. I was able to kind of grab a lot of the stuff from October, November, and December. Some artwork I had created. I was really getting into Half-Life at the time. I was really sort of idolizing the people that had the big websites on the major game-hosted sites. So I just had my little Geocities page, but I was really looking at all the game sites that have been updating and sort of keeping tabs on those. So just some, basically whatever was on my mind at the time, I sort of made an update about. And this is kind of where I was, again, getting a little more edgy, just sort of being a little more sarcastic. Um, I don't know if there's anything here that's sort of cringy. I think most of it's cringy, but it's authentic. It's authentic 1997. Basically, if you can say anything, it's definitely a sign of the times. Yep. Cumus. I don't know. Oh, I think I have some rants out here too, or here's Tom Hall. Here's my idol. I don't know what else I had. Oh, yeah. All right, so then Daily Death, I'll get to that in a second too. So that was a site I ended up joining, but he had a logo contest, and since I was using PaintShop Pro and making these horrible garish images, I submitted a couple splash screen logos for the site just to, I don't know, because I thought maybe it was actually good. The guest book work? Yeah, it's the same guest book. All right, and then at a certain point, I didn't put up any more news, with some sort of sarcastic comment. And then alternatively to my GeoCities site, I took all the images out and I moved them to tripod. And funny enough, this tripod actually still exists on the original website. So you can actually browse the site on tripod at the moment. But what I've done is I've ripped all the content because they had ads all over the place. I took out the ads and I sort of just brought it back to its original state and rehosted it on my site so I didn't have any sort of banners or pop-ups or things like that. So this is basically just images. So I was cutting out manually all the images that I found online just to make them transparent. And pretty much, again, there's a lot of these that were not actually ended up being released. Let's see, I think there's there's something weird down here. I think that never got in the game. Yeah, this was the bull squid in Half-Life. I forget. I know this skin wasn't, but I forget whether these ones are actually included. And I think there was just some random stuff here too. Yeah, like whatever this fish thing was. I don't think that ended up in the game. I don't think there's a mech either, but I don't know. Unreal. I think there was the rabbit with bat wings, and I don't know. A lot of weird stuff here, but basically, anytime I found some images for games, I would add them here. For some reason, I started like taking out certain things when the game was released. I don't know why. I guess this was sort of intended to be like a pre-release game site, but I don't know. All right, so eventually I kind of closed my GeoCities site. So it went from that first one down here to my news site right here. And then I pretty much just closed that down, let it just sit there and fall apart. And then I joined the Daily Death, which was a hosted Half-Life site. Half-Life was still going to be released like a couple years down the line, but we were just sort of anticipating it and putting updates and all sorts of stuff. We also started hosting things too, so I'll get to those in a second, but there's the first revision. So he created the site, and then I went in and I tried to spruce it up. So I added my own backgrounds. I added some, looks like I got some Flash animation here, which I will let it run just for posterity. We added news updates, things like that. We also had, archive news where I had things going way back to the earliest days. That's not early. This is early. Oh yeah, nice, horrible tables and backgrounds and such. So yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. Um, I have no idea. Oh, site updates. I don't know. A lot of the stuff is just sort of like it's all over the place. I had like a different background for every page. It's just sort of yeah, it's all over the place. Levels. I had a filter that would turn things into like old timey film, so I applied that to all the pictures. Basically, it's just sort of an exercise in like the worst ideas possible. But it was something I created. Links to movies, links to music, some art I created. A lot of this stuff is just so horrible. Oh, but it's fun. All right, and then links to other sites, and then contact page. This is back when I didn't have my image on the website or my image online, so I used an old picture of me, added a filter, and blurred it. I'm not sure that was really helping anything, but I don't know. Does the guest book work? It does. Yep, some more guest book entries. Wow, I actually got a lot of these. Yeah. So the site was actually pretty popular. And it led to some good things. It sort of created I don't want to say a good community because back in the late 90s, any sort of gaming community was pretty cringe. Jeez. All right. All right. So that was December. So it was like pretty much right after I quit my GeoCities site. We sort of had an update in April where I used JavaScript to just use drop-down menus to basically do the same thing. Pretty much the content's all going to be exactly the same here. It's just the menu is a little bit different. And then in May, I have a flash menu, flash menu there? Oh, I don't see the link. I don't think the flash menu is working. There we go. All right, yeah. So basically, I have a nice flash animation, which I'm kind of sad that these are going to go away. I know it's not practical. There's no reason for any of this to work. I could just have some sort of oh wow, huh, I didn't even notice this before. Anyway, so I just had some random stuff here, but it's the same thing. It's just more links that go to the same exact sites, but it's Flash and it's pretty. All right. So let me start hosting sites. So I believe I linked to some of the hosted sites here. Some of these I might have had a hand in. I'm not entirely sure. It's been way too long. I'll get to that in a second. Twisted Zoo, and then what I've learned today. This is just a random page. I don't think I even linked to it anywhere, but I found it when I was hunting through my old files. Basically, every day I tried to learn like a new fact, and a lot of them were just like really stupid. Like stupid things like the boss tones saying Enter Sandman. I learned that today. Okay. Random Ripley's facts, life facts. I got Showtime for the weekend. And I have no idea. Oh, Dilbert jargon generator. There were some weird ones in here. I forget, like, I don't know. I slept in every class today. Yeah, college was fun. I don't know how I got through it, but I did. All right, what else are we doing? All right, so the Twisted Zoo was a site that I wasn't really involved with, but I did create the design. I kept the frames just to help with the menus, so I didn't have to duplicate that over all the pages. But as far as the design goes, I started using tables to encapsulate a lot of the content. So the borders of the table were not visible, but I would create these rounded images and place them in there, and that sort of created sort of a rounded, fluid design. You couldn't really use CSS for this at this point. CSS was around in some small way, but not to the point where we had radiuses and curves and all that fun stuff that we can do so much more easily today. So this was going to be a repository for skins. I initially added a lot of the horrible ones I had created. Again, Paint Shop Pro. So yeah, all sorts of really weird stuff. Models. I created some. I think for for Quake 2, you could create models that would then replace the multiplayer person or something like that. I created this guy here. I don't think I ever animated it, but I I think I at least modeled it. I don't know what all this is. I think it's just more stuff. And then I think we're going to have like submissions or something like that. And then, yep. So here's our contact page. Even though I wasn't running the site, I still put myself as a contact because ego. All right, so here's my Half-Life clan. So this is officially the first clan because it just came out so far in advance of Half-Life. No one had even created one yet. So an IRC guy named Goalie, he was in Canada, he dropped by and said he was going to create a clan, and everyone said, it's too early. But I wanted to join. I wasn't any good at it, but I figured I could join and do all the web stuff. So let's take a look at this. Again, I have the Flash and I have the HTML version. So let's go to Flash first because that's going to go away soon. Did that have Flash? Oh, guess not. Huh. All right, let's go to HTML. So again, just have news, news related to what we're doing with the clan, the army, who is in it. So we had different divisions. So we had so Roll in the Filth, or Roll in Your Filth was the name of the clan. But then there was a few different divisions. We had the Napalm Death Division, the Alpha, and the Phantasm Division. And I think I muscled my way into like creating my own just because like I had to sort of get into everything. I think we had like a password protected thing, some rules. I have no idea. A lot of the stuff is just like random, but it's still there. And then we had our IRC. And I created sort of splash images for each of these two. This is probably a site I need to rebuild at some point, but yeah, so there's just a lot of just random stuff related to the clan. And then we did have one sub site here where we had just the Phantasm division had its own website. I don't think I had anything to do with this one, but it was part of it, so I hosted it as well. All right, so then I forget when this was. This was sometime in May. So Daily Death, we kept lobbying to get hosted by, or we wanted a domain because I think it was like frag.com/half-life was our address, and we wanted to have a domain name. And of course, halflife.com was taken because all the .coms were taken by then. So halflife.net with a dash was one that was available. So I think we registered that, and we were originally going to try to rebrand our site using that domain. So we created a whole bunch of different layouts at this point. So places like Planet Quake created Planet Half-Life, and like there was a lot of sites out there at this point. So we were kind of like rivals with a lot of those. So we were trying to just sort of vie for a little bit of space because since our site had been around for so long, we felt like we had a little bit of seniority, but we were kind of falling real behind because Planet Quake was just such a behemoth at the time. So this is what I sort of call the upside down L design, where basically instead of using frames, you usually use something like a server-side include, where you do create a one menu file, but then you have the server actually place it into every page. So that way you don't have to duplicate the work, but it does require the server to do a little bit of heavy lifting to push that into. That way you could have the menu on the page itself, the content in the middle, and then usually like it would sort of wrap around with some sort of logo or header at the top. And you're going to see a lot of the sites are going to share this design pretty much for the next couple years or so. So again, we just have our main news, some archives going back to whenever. I think I actually brought in all the old Daily Death logs. 3D Gophers, what is this? I think I even brought in like I brought in the old Geocities website as well. So I brought in like everything from my Geocities site to the Daily Death all the way to the current time. And then most of these stuff is going to be exactly the same. So all the information, monsters, weapons, everything that I already had on the previous sites, I pretty much just replicated here. I believe the only thing that might have changed would be the contact page, where I added a few extra people. So that was the initial layout. We sort of changed it very slightly. I think someone named Dreamline, he submitted his version of this. So instead of having the L design, we just sort of had a floating menu over to the side. And then he wanted us to create a brand new image for every time we updated it. And I wasn't a fan of that because I didn't want to have to create a new image every time I did an update. And there was no updating script or anything. You actually just edit the HTML, change all of the text, change all the tabs, make a whole new section and re-upload it. And then when to archive it, you had to archive it manually as well. So that was never fun to do. Here's another proposed redesign. Again, using images to sort of flesh out the rounded aspects of the site. Same sort of stuff. A lot of this is broken because I think I just had like the main splash page here. And I think what we ended up was settling. Actually, I don't think we settled on anything. I don't think this even happened at all. So here's another design that he created where it's sort of a more of a bluish design as opposed to the real industrial concrete one. And I think I also hosted the. Does this one work? There we go. All right, so this is the one that did have the Flash entry with it. So this site, and then I think the next one that I created, I started, instead of doing like a black design, I was really enamored by having like a white with like blue text, almost sort of like a washed out nuclear winter sort of thing. Flash is one. Then I also had the HTML version, which was pretty much the same thing, just with some static stuff. The Psycho Pig was one of our mascots, so I used Photoshop. I think I was using Photoshop finally by now, and I learned what the burn and the dodge tool were. So I would just do a flat color and use the burn and dodge to sort of create 3D elements here. And I pretty much use that like everywhere. Yeah, so most of these things are going to be sort of broken. Here's the new Phantasm thing. So this is actually a design I'll get to in a second. I sort of recycled this from another website that I've created. Electrochitin, that was my squad within the thing. So I sort of muscled my way in and created my own. Let's see if I have mascot. Okay, so here's all the mascots that we had. Do I have anything else? No. Okay. All right, so Rantino Fly. So this is definitely the cringiest thing I've ever did. So I basically made a site where I would just rant about things because, again, it was 17, almost 18, and, around that age, you're just hating the world and want to burn it down and all that fun stuff. This is on Zoom, XOOM. It was another free hosting site that I was able to get some sort of hosting on. So anytime I found a new host, I thought of a reason to create a new site. So basically, all I would do here is I would just sort of like give my thoughts on things and recap what happened on Mancow in the morning. There's my view on the government, all sorts of stuff. Links, and then my life story, which I won't bother you with that. And then Rantino Fly, that was the mascot for this. It was like a half rhino, elephant, fly sort of thing. All right, so less of that, the better. And then I believe I abandoned that and I just turned that into like my portfolio page. So let's see what we have, which, yeah, I think top is the most recent. All right, so as I'm creating all these sites, I start archiving them, or at least archiving portions of it, which is kind of what I did in this main site here. But at the time, I also brought in everything. So basically, I had the Twisted Zoo, all the Half-Life stuff that I had created, Flashy. So here's a site I made entirely.
Welcome to Flashy. Use the menu to navigate this site. Have a nice day.
So it's a site I made entirely in Flash. I think it still uses frames. I don't think any of these things actually go anywhere, but yeah. Again, another reason I'm creating this video, because all these stuff are just not going to be around anymore. Just more images I created using the burn and dodge tool. Some backgrounds I've created. JavaScript. Basically just being able to do random things. All right, Flash. Let's go through all the Flash things real quick, just because I always saw this one before. Making of a Hodges main. It's a company I used to work for. I think this is probably one of the very first Flash things I had ever created. It's a video. I was just sort of experimenting with different things. All the things I could do for animations. Green spheres. Okay. And eventually I started using this to create cartoons. I will get to those in a second. I had a couple random ones here, but I will get to those once I get to the proper site. And then what else we have? Yeah, so that's it for that. So I started out with like an old Wild West sort of theme. Again, I was using that filter that made things look like old film. Then I sort of moved to a very streamlined, almost more of a pretentious. I was seeing a lot of like artistic and college sites that were doing these very abstract things. So basically, again, same content, just a different. Does this work? Oh, it does. So this is modeled after the Monty Python's Waste of Time software, where basically it just gave you an image, and if you clicked on stuff, stuff would happen. Unfortunately, I did lose the source code to this, so I was not able to continue editing it. So this is actually like a mid-production one where I have all the hotspots kind of laid out here. And basically every time you click on something, it just keeps doing stuff. And then the more you click it, the more things happen. Until eventually it just sort of like stops working. Yeah, eventually it just gets like more chaotic. The more you click on it, the more weird it gets. And eventually it just
Alas, poor young, I knew him well.
Okay. Anyway, what do we got? I have more Half-Life menu stuff. All right, so then I moved into, again, back into sort of a, I think this is kind of how it ended up. So this one and the one after it are very similar to each other. I just used a lot of different backgrounds to sort of push into the tables and create all sorts of stuff. Crowbar mod. Here's another website I did with just menus and curves and all sorts of stuff. I don't think this actually ended up being created at any point, but yep, there's that one. Here's some more images, backgrounds, more Flash, waste of time. That's the one we already saw. Okay. Yep. So here's so going back to my clan. This is the intro for the division I created. So I was in biology at the time, and I learned about different sugar constructs. So I thought chitin was I don't know. I was just trying to show off what I learned in school. All right. So then I created the whole site in Flash on this one. So basically each of the sugar carbon structures would go to a different website in this. And then the last version of it was basically the same thing. I just had sort of, I redid the menu here. I might have added some other content. Yeah, some more photos and things like that. Yep, we already saw those. Okay, all right, so I think we saw pretty much everything. Nope, here's a new one. All right, so this was for Quake 3 Arena, which was coming out, I believe, in 1999. I was going to run it with someone I was running a Half-Life site with. I don't believe it ever got off the ground, but I was doing some of the Flash and animation work with it. It's just another Flash thing I created for the Half-Life clan. And this site doesn't exist anymore, so we're just going to forget about that. So this was just over the course of July through May of 99 where the times I did that. All right, so what happened was Half-Life.net fell through. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to run back and I'm just going to go back to the original host and resuscitate the site. I think I was going to run it with Visid, who I was on IRC with at the time. And again, I just brought in like the same old content from way back in the day. So basically, it was just going to be a few different people running it, same content. And I kind of took the Half-Life design that I had created, or someone had helped create, made it text instead of image based, and then sort of ran with that. And then I think I changed it ever so slightly once we got up. So this one actually did start running for a while. I believe at a certain point, I think I stopped. If you go to like the Wayback Machine and look at this, I think I bowed out at some point. I kind of just got sick of the whole community because there were just people I wasn't terribly happy with. And then I believe they continued running it for a little bit of time after that. Yeah, pretty much till December of 98. They pretty much kept running it. I believe there's one more attempt after that. So this is kind of like version 2. And then I think there was a version 3 after that we were tried to reunite, but it didn't really end up working. What ended up happening is I moved to Far Too Cool, which was a UK site that he was also kind of disillusioned with the whole community as well. So we created a brand new site. We tried to make it look like a newspaper design. So we had like, the barcode, news updates became issues. And then I used like halftone patterns for some of the images and things like that. So this site's fairly comprehensive. A lot of broken links because I only had like some of these sites. I think I pulled a lot of this off the Wayback Machine as well. So there's not a whole lot of these ones that are 100%, but they're a fair amount. So basically, I think I had some like articles and things like that. Yeah, so a lot of these still kind of exist, but not 100%. This site, I don't know. I had a copy of the site on my hard drive. I honestly don't know if I had anything to do with this site. It's an editing site. I see myself updating some of these things. So I think I must have had some hand in it, but I don't think I created this design at all. Again, I grabbed a lot of this off the Wayback Machine and I had some of the stuff on my hard drive, but yeah, there's another archive via the Wayback. So I don't think I had too much to do with that. Here's another revision of the Half-Life clan, which was updated as of the newest version. Here's another attempt for me to try to make money off things by advertising that I can do Flash and images and all that fun stuff. And then here's the Quake 3 Arena site, which I think I created a design for. I know I created this image here. I created that Flash thing, but I don't think that ended up going anything. And then I also started working with like 3D in Lightwave, and I created some images so he was going for sort of some like funky 70s design here. So I rendered up a lava lamp and added afros to all the Quake creatures and stuff. I don't know. I don't think that ended up being used at all. So this site was from free servers. So again, every time there's another host, I make some sort of use of it. And I didn't know what to make of the site. So I basically just made it a hub where I just had links to all my other sites. And I use Flash. So I had my portfolio site, which is the one we just saw before, chat statistics, which is no longer online, random links, and then my tunes. So I started creating cartoons. We actually did update our main site at this point, so we just sort of kept with the space theme, and these links pretty much link to the same exact places, so nothing is really new in that regard. This one I actually lost until I started doing my archive recently. So when I started taking all my cartoons and putting it on my new main site, which I'll get to in a second, I called them Happy Tunes, or at least the title said Happy Tunes at the top, and I had no idea why. Apparently, I'd actually created a Tunes site off my main family site where I had a lot of these cartoons I had created in Flash. And let's see. Well, there we go. So I started creating a lot of like Flash cartoons going back to '98. Some of these were on my Half-Life site. Some of them were just on personal things I traded with people. And basically, I just started to sort of collect them all here. These ended up being collated into a later site, but the site was purely dedicated to just the cartoons that I had created. So Half-Life was kind of a fun thing to do because Half-Life has such a simple art style. It actually looked really good in Flash. Did I say Half-Life or South Park? I'm sorry. South Park had a very good art design that suited itself for Flash. So each of these had some sort of cartoon here, and I intend to probably archive these as like MP4s, maybe host them on YouTube, or if I can, maybe I'll try to convert them to HTML5. I'm not sure how well these are going to work. So I'm just going to scan through them here real quick just so we can kind of see some of them. So worst case, if I can't archive them in a proper format, the site as it stands here will at least sort of look good because this site is so Flash heavy because it's really just a purely Flash site. There's no way I'm going to be able to archive this in any meaningful manner. That's not going to look completely different. Especially ones like this where it's like interactive. Do you need help? No. So this is based on the Clippy, the paperclip thing in Word. Yes, yes, really, really sure. Had the wasted time thing, had the high school, and then
Hello, little girl. Guess what time it is?
It's satanic worshipping time.
That's right, and do you know what to eat while worshipping our demonic overlord?
No.
New sugar-frosted pentagrams.
Yay.
With 100 grams of fat per pentagram, it's sure to keep you filled up while you do your devil worshipping.
But how much does it cost?
It's a bargain at only $6.66.
I want some.
Alright, little girl, here you go. But wait, is that cow's milk you're using?
Yeah.
I think you know what would be better.
Oh yeah.
You have done well, my child.
so all sorts of more edgy stuff, unique to my sense of humor. All right, so here is yet another version of the Roll in Your Filth clan. More Flash menus. I rendered out some text in Lightwave and 3D, and then I manually traced it into a raster format. So it looked like it's 3D, but it's actually just a bunch of 2D images that move on. So we have the squads here. So I don't think any of these are gonna. Most of these aren't gonna. Yeah, most of these aren't gonna work. But I just tried to archive it as best I could. What else we got? Digital business card. Yeah, just some more hosted sites. I had files on my hard drive, so I included them when I found them. All right, Team Fortress 2. So Team Fortress 2 didn't come out for probably like almost a decade later. But just like Duke Nukem Forever and stuff like that, we were looking forward to it. Had been announced, and basically we were going to create some sites for it. So Visid, who the person I was doing the last version of Daily Death with, I decided to create a site with him about Team Fortress 2. I don't believe any of these links work because we didn't actually have any content. But if you look here, Team Fortress 2, instead of the cartoony thing that we're used to now, is actually going to be a very traditional military-themed team versus team thing. Here's another version with lots of just random stuff here. And then we have a couple screenshots of what Team Fortress 2 is going to look like. Not entirely. And then there's the original logo that I was going to use for the site. Originally, this was going to be for Fortress2.net, but I believe it never actually happened. Instead, we tried in vain to create version 3 of the Daily Death Half-Life site. As you see here, there's absolutely nothing of content. It is just a plot for how I would like the site to look. And this is sort of designed to look like the orgy video for Blue Monday, or not Blue Monday, Stitches. I see things and then I have ideas and I decide to like base everything based on something I spotted for like 2 seconds. moving on, I redid my school website. So I have a couple versions here. So basically, I have the old one and then a slightly newer one. So every time I took a class, I would add extra content for it. So here I had like a digital media class. Of course, none of the stuff works. And I believe I copied these over to my current site as well. So yeah, I took a site on making web pages, so that was it was fun. I just sort of did whatever I felt like, and then uh, here's a site on Java. None of these Java things work anymore, but I did actually create. I redid these in my latest Danarchy site. So a lot of times things when they didn't really work anymore, I've tried to recreate them, but instead of posting them in the original location, I just moved them into other places. There's that. All right. Finally, in 2000, I created my own new domain called Decemberize. And this is going to be like my new personal web page. So this is kind of the spiritual successor to my Dan site. I actually got a legitimate host at this point, as opposed to all the free ones I had been piggybacking on. And I just picked out a name. It goes back to some in-joke in high school, so there's really nothing else there. And I created a sort of an intro animation that would like slowly grow over time. So every time I thought up something new, I would have a little bit extra piece to this animation. So I believe even at this point, I may have not had it completely created, but I still have the whole thing here at least. So I'll let it run just to see the whole thing.
Hey, honey, I'm home.
How was your day, dear?
Fine, now give me some grub.
But honey, we don't want to eat the kids. Who could that be?
Probably just another salesman. Eyes on sticky film.
We will not let this country be overrun by the Irish, so we have developed these teleportation devices for us.
And then it would just link to the main site. So anytime I added something new, I had my Flash section for all my cartoons and things to show off. I had music reviews, cartoons. I'd been creating a lot of movies over the years, so we started finally making a web presence for that. I had some stories, photos, and then some random animations. So inside of this, I had hosted sites for each of those. So I had a lot of the movies I had created, some screenplays where they sort of went over and transcribed a lot of the stuff. I also had a page for my Duct Wars series. So that was sort of our Star Wars parody. We created several movies based on that. A few of them were still in progress at the time, so I'd have extra information about things that were upcoming. Six Aces was another movie that I already created at the time, or maybe I was still in creating it, I forget. All the cartoons that I had then created were also here. Art I had done in school, more portfolio things, so more like layouts I had created. So we've pretty much seen most of these, but a lot of them were just for like other sites. Just out of curiosity, here's the old Netscape. So this is the size of the screen that we pretty much had to work with. So here's the old Netscape screen and the old Winamp, which looks exactly the same. Animations I had created, which I don't think work anymore. Reviews of CDs, which are really pretty cringe. Movie reviews, which I didn't do, but I would later. Short stories, choose your own adventure that I did on paper that I then transcribed into like a web format. And I actually had a Sims one. So I actually created if you played The Sims, it actually created websites for you. So then I hosted them here as well. And I don't have the website. Okay, so let's jump on back. All right, so then I started playing with ASP Classic, or it's called ASP Classic now. It was just called ASP back then, where basically you could do some server-side scripting as well as some database. So first thing I did is I started creating a database for all the CDs that I owned, and you're able to then, filter it by, bands, sort it by bands, sort it by year, and basically it's just sort of a way for me to get a practice with database, which became a huge part of a lot of the sites that I would create later on. So it was just sort of a good exercise to kind of figure out. And this again was hosted on my university site because I was now a student there at the time. This site was actually created by my friends. It was the official Duct Wars page that he created. Some more flash here, where basically we just went through all the characters, the people making the movie, stories, some downloads, things like that. So this was a site that I think he actually registered ductwars.com, or no, it was ductwars.daru, then it was a Geocities site, and then I think we actually did buy the domain at some point, but that was just a bounce that went to my Zoom. So we had it in several different places, but this site only lasted for a short while before I sort of rolled it into my main Decemberized one. So I did a quick update. Instead of having the camcorder screen, I sort of created a more aesthetically pleasing, at least in my eyes, view of this. Same cartoon, same updates. You can skip past that. I ended up creating a news updater, so you can actually update news. So I had, I think I had a few people was it just me? Yeah, I actually had a few people updating the site, although they didn't really do it for too long. Not too much change here. I think I added a couple extra things to like the DCJ and the Duct Wars page and the Six Aces page got its own one now. But I'll show you how that looks in just a second. More cartoons, art, portfolio, animation. Those are pretty much the same. I got rid of the movie reviews because I didn't really do anything with that. So not a whole lot changed there. You also notice that the random images change here too. So anytime I found a cool image or a character, I would cut them out and turn them into a random corner. All right, so here's the Six Aces page. This is a movie that I had created. I created the entire, yes, I know, allow it. So I created the entire site in Flash, which was really unwieldy, horrible to update. So eventually I scrapped that, but I did find the original files here. So everything was based on cards. So all the cards had different functions. So we had the news section, which I would update every so often, and then it upload this entire thing here. I believe some of the files actually imported other Flash files, so I didn't have to update everything every time, but it was still kind of a pain every time I wanted to do an update here. I also had some factoids at the top. I was really happy with how this looked. I cut out all the characters that we had in our movie and kind of made them different colors, so I really liked how this looked. Each of the characters that we had in the movie were represented up here. So I had this sort of black and red theme going on that kind of looked cool. I had some media, so we have, I believe what these are, just, oh yeah, so all these file sizes here are how big the other Flash files. So each of these actually brings in another Flash file that then gets imported into this main Flash file. So here's just some screenshots from the movie. Just did a lot of fire and burning in a forest, which was probably not the smartest thing to do. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Some cool images, sounds, movies, and then some contacts. So that was fun. My friend in his school, they started to make a movie too. So this is one I sort of resurrected. This one I had to do a little bit trickery to get working because it was very heavily ASP and database driven. So I couldn't just like pull it up on my computer and save a copy of it. So I actually hosted it somewhere temporarily. And then I just scraped all the static pages off it, turned it into just plain old HTML. So this is just sort of some information about the movie and the newspaper that they created. Visid, who he had done the Half-Life.net and the Fortress 2 site, he wanted to do a site. He had his own domain and wanted me to sort of create a site for him. And I don't think any of these actually go anywhere, but this is just sort of a template design that I had created. So the Six Aces site, it was no longer feasible to do it in Flash anymore, so I just sort of turned it into a site which still had Flash for the menu, which is probably not the best idea, but at least the whole site is in Flash at this point. Same sort of thing, same basic, characters, images, screenshots from everything, couple movie files. Actually, I have the entire movie up here, although I don't think any of these work anymore. Nope. And then sounds and stuff. So this is sort of the last version of it. And I believe I did update it. So I updated it, in 2005, I actually found that old Flash site and rehosted it. So I've been sort of updating these over the years, but nothing too. All right, what is this? This is my CMT 200 page. So this goes off my Solve one, or my school one. All right, so then what I did is I started making a movie review site. So I started getting addicted to B movies, movies that were just like terrible, old, kind of silly. And I started wanting to review some of them because I started seeing some B movie review sites. And anytime I see something new, I suddenly get an idea and want to do it myself. So I took all of these CD reviews that I had done on my Decemberized sites and then mixed them into some movie reviews, as well as even reviews of like my own movies just for fun. So I had it broken down into pretty much A-list movies, which were professional ones, which I believe I didn't review at all. B movies, which were just either like old grindcore stuff or silly movies. C movies were the ones that we created. So I said, we're not even B movie quality, we're C tier. And then series and things like that. I got the movies and all that stuff. Cam portals was something I thought was stupid at the time because basically people would just upload and they would have like a sort of a webcam on their computer and it would FTP the image to a host. And then if you hotlink to that image, you could have the hotlink on a page with all the other ones, and they would just constantly update any time someone updated their cam. I obviously didn't do that, so I just sort of created like a fake one where I had different cam pictures that didn't actually update. All right, cult icons. I had staff, which was me and other made-up stuff. Links, and then some frequently asked questions. Now, this site actually got a lot of traffic, so I'd actually use this site to then use the Google. Once Google came around and you got better ratings based on how many things linked to you, I would use this site to link to my other sites, and then I'll get more traffic for those sites because this one actually got a fair amount of traffic. So sort of a way for me to sort of market my other stuff based on the popularity of this one. This was actually a cam portal site. So this is the one we hosted on my university server. So this was just sort of we had a camera called Zeus running, which would just take pictures of the lab every so often and update the picture. Nothing major there, just all right, Team Clambot. So this was our battle bot. So we actually created a battle bot and we had it compete in Comedy Central. Didn't last more than a round or two, but it was fun.
And Matt Spammer deftly avoided the steel trap of Roadhog and got the knockout victory at 242. Skidmark, Manic Aggressive, and Matt Spammer all advance.
Yeah, so we basically sort of built it out of an old Barbie truck, and then we brought it to Comedy Central, and we actually competed in a couple rounds, so kind of cool. Funny story, we were trying to do the lightweight one, which means we couldn't be any heavier than 60 pounds, and we were just under. We spray painted it, and the weight of the paint actually pushed it over the 60-pound mark, so we had to like cut off random stuff and make it underweight. So it was always a sort of tenuous thing to make it work. So here's us actually competing at BattleBots. We did win one round, mainly out of technicality. And then just some more random pictures. We actually submitted we did a parade. We did a season 4 where we competed and didn't really get too far. And then I believe season 5 we didn't. Did we? Actually, we did compete. We didn't get too far. We were mostly working staff at that point, so there was really So we didn't really get too far. It was more just like kind of working the back end scenes, which was almost more fun in the end. All right, Decemberized. I created an update to the site. I got rid of the Flash animation, and I also sort of merged it with the DCJ movie site. So again, it's same basic content. Once you get past it, you get the old design, but I just had a new splash image here with an image map where you could jump to random things. The new Duct Wars that we were creating was going to be in progress, so showing some previews for that. I got rid of the music reviews. Some of the old stuff I kind of kept around, but not a whole lot. Okay. So there was a new Duct Wars 3. There was an uncompleted Duct Wars 4, but this page never really went off the ground. I tried to create a whole new site for it, but nothing really came of that. All right. I then updated it in 2003. For some reason, I got rid of the sort of snowy design. I went with this like orange and red. I'm not really sure why. Same content. I just got rid of the whole menu thing, which means you had to like go back every time. So it didn't really help with the content. It didn't really fit, but I did have a random image that would then update every so often, every time you went to the page. Just sort of exploits with my friends and I, just sort of commemorating all the fun stuff we did. I did create a site specifically for Duct Wars, so instead of the one that I had hosted on Decemberized, I created its own one where I just went over the 4 movies that we had created after the 4th one was completed. I created some news sections, some cover art for all the releases that we had, as well as the characters, which movies they were in, some basic information, and things like that. All right, I got sick of that old Decemberized design, so I went back to sort of a snowy one, and this is kind of how it looks now. It's a little bit different, but basically more or less the same. I kept the images, which then refresh over time, but I changed them blue, and then these links would just slowly start to grow over time, basically. And then I would also link to my other random sites just to help a little bit of extra traffic. So this was that was the 2006 version. Here's the 2004 version. Again, pretty much the same thing. I wanted to create a page for us and our cats, so we had just some images for little kitties we had and all the pets that we had for a short while. I delved deep into like a database design, so I wanted a database drive all of our sites, all the people that were in them, all the characters we had. So basically you can go to sort of any one of these here and you can see what the character is, who they're played by, and then what movie they were in. Or if you want to go to the movie, you could have all the characters that were in that movie, where they took place, what equipment we had. So this is just sort of a fun way to sort of catalog everything that I created. I did update our Goshzilla site because it was getting, again, very unwieldy to update this every time because it was basically a very static site. So every time I added something, I had to do it manually. So I went back to, I think, ASP, and I created a database-driven site, which thankfully still works. I'm not sure how long that'll go on, but basically I broke it down into not just, A-list movies, B-list, C-list, and such. I brought it down into genre. And I think I also had tags too, so if you went in tags, you can grab everything that was related to other stuff, because I did start doing food reviews, we started doing articles, and I had another friend help out with this, so we were able to tag team it, and we almost did like daily updates for quite a while, which is kind of fun. So we were able to just sort of watch a B movie every day and then take a look at that and do a quick review. And the site, it got some decent traffic. A lot of the directors for some of the lesser known movies would find it and leave me notes. So I was able to connect with a few people that were, ranged from local small time movie producers to actually a few that were fairly more well known. And so this was it was a fun thing for a while, but then eventually you just sort of got tired doing daily updates, and then that didn't really last so much. So yeah, so we're up to like 2008 now. Here is 2008 version of Decemberized. I created a news updating script to sort of link to all of my other websites, which again was fine for a while, but then you start to get tired and don't want to do that anymore. I created a site for my fake rap group, which was just sort of an inside joke. I started going to concerts around 2009. So what I would do is I would do some quick videos, and I would do a lot of photography for the local bands, and I would photograph or record a lot of their videos, and just sort of just sort of give them sort of an experience where it sort of looked semi-professional. Looked like I had like a lot of different cameras, a lot of different angles. It's all faked. I just recorded one take, and then I added a lot of like B-roll in there. A lot of it didn't match up, but it was something that the bands appreciated. So I sort of went through and collected all those in one spot. Later on, we started doing some snake breeding, and again, I started making a database to collate all of the snakes that I had been producing. So a lot of the snakes that I had available were listed here. So if I wanted to sell one of these snakes, I could then link them to this site with a QR code, and then they could go and they could, find out what genetics are in the snake, some pictures of it, as well as the offspring that it created. And then you can sort of link to those two, find out who the parents were, find out who the offspring of those were. So it's just sort of a way to sort of add a little bit of extra value to the snake breeding business that we did. This sort of ended a couple years ago, so I haven't done it since, but the site's there just in case people want to still see some of the information about what I've bred. I tried to revive Godzilla in 2013. It didn't really last long. I created a new design that wasn't so table structure, table heavy. I don't know if that's a word. Basically, instead of using tables, I used div and floats and CSS to sort of create the design. It was sort of my first attempt to really use any sort of design like that. So it's really rudimentary. I didn't really understand it too much. So there's a lot of sort of clunkiness to this, but it's just something I did to sort of practice a little bit more with CSS. This only lasted a couple updates before I sort of abandoned that as well. All right, so that kind of cuts off to the point where all the sites that are no longer in effect. So I'm going to go over the ones that are still active right now, even if they're not 100% updated all the time. The X Entertainment / Dinosaur Dracula Wiki is one I've maintained for all of the Advent calendar stories that that Matt has created. So I go over and I have just sort of synopsises of each of the days and characters and all the different characters that are part of this multi-year saga, which unfortunately isn't updated anymore. So, but I always find more information, and I try to keep this up to date with as much information as I can find. The DCJ's production site is basically just a hub at this point. It just links to other sites that I've already talked about, but it does have its own domain. Godzilla still does technically exist. I moved it to a WordPress site now, so I don't have to maintain it. I hoped to update this over time, but again, most of the work was just creating the site, and then after that, I didn't really feel like updating it. So basically, I had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 updates since the time I redid it. They're in version 2, so that didn't last too long, but that is the version that is currently online now. I started doing a lot of bug photography starting in like 2006, 2007. So I started sort of cataloging a lot of the images and bugs that I have found. I created a taxonomic structure that breaks it all down, kind of shows me some photos, when I found it, where I found it, and then also allows you to browse things that are in a similar group. So if you find something out in the wild, I can sort of use this site to quickly determine, based on my past findings, what sort of insect it is. And it's not just insects. I actually, have, crustaceans, and I even have like amphibians and things like that too. So basically anything I find out in the wild, I try to catalog and then allow myself to have sort of a handy cheat sheet. Everything Nothing. This is a site that is my archive or my articles. So basically this allows me to just sort of create, articles every so often about things I'm interested in, food reviews, random things I find, thoughts on topics, stuff like that. So it's sort of it's called Everything Nothing because back in like 2000 or so, if you had a site that was just sort of like random, just sort of like all over the place, it was called Everything Nothing. It was about everything, but it was also about nothing at the same time. So it was just a way to sort of have a personal site that was just all over the place. So that's sort of a nod to that, but it is just a traditional like article site where I just have, thoughts about things and just sort of a way to create articles. So Danarchy is my latest site. This site is an ode to the old web. I've tried to make it as chaotic and crazy as possible, but also behind the scenes, there's actually a lot going on here to make it useful. So as chaotic as this looks, it actually has a lot of functions. So it is actually mobile friendly. So if you shoot it into mobile view, it actually does work. It all crunches down, it moves things around, it adjusts things. So it actually does work pretty well in mobile view. I've tried to make all of my sites here be mobile ready. So this site has a lot of different stuff in it. So basically, um, I've got some sort of history on my web stuff, which is pretty much what I'm doing in this video here. I've got links to my latest articles. I've got some pages for a lot of the games I've used to play. And then every site in this I've actually made completely different to reflect either the style of web pages at the time or the style of the game at the time. So each one of these is sort of an exercise in creating a brand new site. Like this one is very heavily based on the old way that I created my very first Quake site, complete with the huge borders and tables and stuff. And as you see, this is all the stuff that I had originally hosted there, and I've tried to like rehost it on this site as well. And then I also rehosted all the Sims site as well. I got some music links here, some holiday stuff, just the horribly garish Christmas site, which is one of my, I'm actually very proud of this one because it's just like so completely, oh yeah, MIDI music and everything. But it's October. I'm not going to be getting into Christmas right now. Then what I started doing is going on my hard drive and finding old stuff and trying to sort of rehost it. So like I found a whole bunch of old backgrounds I had back in like 97 or so. So actually, if you go to the About one, this kind of gets you a better idea. So the earliest images I ever have on my images are actually from 1988. It was a dinosaur program. It was actually a digital coloring book where you could just click on areas and color in the images of dinosaurs. So I saved all those. I had an archive of all my MS Paint documents and pictures and things like that. Disney Animation Studio was a program that allowed you to sort of do a frame-by-frame animation and turn it into animations. And I just sort of did a screen capture and sort of turned them all into animated images. And then way back when I created a batch file, which would allow me to sort of jump through all the animations. So I just screen capped that as well. And I made that part of the website. All the documents that I had on my website or on my hard drive, I rehost all those, but I turned it into a simulation of Windows 3.1. So all the ways you had all the, I don't know, what do you call it? Dialog boxes and things like that. I started to make it look sort of like WordPerfect, where you could go to different drives and bring up different files and stuff like that. You can also minimize it and you can move stuff around and whatnot. But if you want, you can also go into the desktop thing and you can change the images. So it's not a complete copy of Windows 3, but I tried to copy at least some of it. Rehosted some of the old ray trace things I downloaded off MP3s, or off BBSs rather. I've got some mod files. Again, these are ones I downloaded off of BBS. These are some of the very first images that I downloaded off the internet. So back when we had the websites or the access to the web, I would go and I would grab pictures of cards that I already owned. And then I found these on my hard drive and I thought it was kind of cool to rehost those. So it looks like June 22nd, 95 was actually the very first file that I downloaded to my computer. It was an image of the Gen X comic. So that's kind of the oldest thing that I have on my computer that's directly from the internet in some fashion. I got some animated images that I've collected, more background, ASCII art, which is kind of cool. So I was into this for a while, so I saved a lot of those and I rehosted those. These are all the now buttons that I've collected over time. These are just random images I downloaded off the internet. I would keep them all in one folder, so it's kind of cool to have all those. In 2000, I got my first digital camera. So it's actually this camera right here, not this exact one, but the same model. And I took all of the images that I've saved and put them into different folders, which I represented as flashcards. And then I'm able to use this camera here to kind of jump between the two. So I've always tried to like mimic the way they were originally seen in some sort of web page. I've been doing a little bit with 3D stuff. This is just tutorial, but then way back in like the 90s and the early 2000s, I had done some sort of 3D work, mostly for the movies I had created. Here's the Java one. So here is one that I basically recreated everything in Java into the canvas tag. So I took all the code that was originally in Java and I just basically manually redid all the logic in JavaScript and then used the canvas object to basically paint what I needed to do. All right, so that's pretty much everything in this portion here. I also have one from my old IRC stats where I have statistics for all the many, many hours I spent in IRC chat rooms with all the people that we had in there. So originally I had this hosted on a Zoom site, but I found the original file. Actually, I lost the original files, but I found the program. But I still have my log file, so I ended up going and I just recreated them all from scratch. I have a text adventure, which I won't get into, some photography, some tutorials, a page for all the dreams that I've had over the years with some graphics that I've created, some panoramas. So this is my old room. Some cool stuff here. So I had the forethought to take like a 360 photo and I stitched them together. And then I found like a JavaScript thing that allowed me to turn it into a panorama. And if you actually view this on your phone, you can move the phone around and it will sort of simulate like a window looking into my old room. So I got a VCR there. I got some old CD burnables. Flash 2, Flash 3, The Sims, Diablo 2. Some of the artwork I created in class, CD changer, some old CRTs running Winamp, Sims, Math Blaster Mystery, Paint Shop Pro, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, some cool stuff. Now this one's cool. This is actually my house being built back in '93. This is from a VHS tape. Someone just did like he spun around and I just took screenshots and stitched them together. So this is actually a house being built a long time ago. And then I just have links to some other people. All right, overview. This is the big one. This is the one that basically is still going on. I've been running this since 2004. It's an Oakley website. And basically, I've tried to catalog everything that I can as far as the glasses go and stuff like that. So anytime we add something new, I try to put it into the database and organize it by models and colors and all sorts of stuff. There's a forum for talking to people and all that stuff. And I believe I have some old versions here. So this actually came from an RPG game that came off of my personal site. So the original site was just sort of this white thing here with just some basic reviews, and then eventually it's turned into sort of a graphical version. Again, I have that upside down L design with the menu and a header. And then I have version 4 where I do the same thing, but I kind of move into like a centered design. Again, same sort of menu design here. Version 5, I have sort of a hidden menu here, which doesn't work anymore, but it would pop out just to sort of save some real estate. I was still designing for very thin screens at the time because not everyone had a big widescreen, but that became less relevant over time. Here's version 6, more like a space design. I brought the menu back out. Not too much different, but you know. Version 7 doesn't work, so let's see. All right, so here's version 7. This is when I started using CSS a bit more, so I finally stopped using tables for everything, just like the Godzilla site. So I was using CSS and divs and floats and stuff, which I was really not terribly comfortable with, but it sort of worked, sort of. And then I started just using like the full screen real estate and doing centering and stuff like that. So this basically we very adaptable to different screen sizes, so it's not fixed into very certain dimensions. And then version 9 I don't have online at the moment, but it's not really a good version. Version 10 I also don't have, and then this is version 11. So this is like a fully PHP version. I moved the database to SQL instead of Access, and then I sort of modernized it a bit. And it's also very mobile friendly as well. So if you go to the mobile view, it's going to look a little bit better too. What else we got? And then that brings us to Decemberized. This again is just the current version, nothing too special. Has links to all the old sites, the old DCJ movie sites, the Duct Wars site, which most of the stuff hasn't really been changed since the dawn of time. I created a photographic portfolio at one point, but again, haven't updated that in years. It just got too unwieldy. I do have all my tunes, which still work as of now, except until a couple months from now. So we've already seen this one, but I did keep a few of these revived. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll try to basically redo these and make them movie files or something like that. All the old stuff, like my CD reviews and the old versions of the sites, are here as well, but we've already seen that on the main site. And then links, photos, and then subsites. So there's the Duct Wars site, there's the Six Aces site, ClanBot, we've seen this, and then that's pretty much it. And then the hub. So that'll do. That is all my sites from 1995 up through 2020. Pretty much this site's pretty much dormant. This site is very much active. This site is very much active. This is a subsite of Danarchy, so that is more or less active. This one I update every so often. It's usually seasonal because bugs only appear during a couple months during the year that, of note. This is no longer active. This is a hub. This I update once in a while, and then everything here is pretty much archival. So that is it. 2000s, 2005, 2004. Back in time. That's it. Thank you for listening. If you did listen, if not, that's okay too. This is kind of just for me, but I'll figure out, put it out there in case someone finds this interesting. Thank you.